I am live. I continue my reading of A Lot to Remember. It's Joan Marshall Grant's journeys through Lot in France. It's an area in France, and I'm in chapter 26 now, or on chapter 26. It is entitled Station SOUFFLE. This was published in 1962. She passed away in 1989. The first 75 kilometers of the Lot, upstream from Cahors, has a road on each side, and it's difficult to decide whether to choose the high or the low, the left or the right bank, when beginning the journey to its source in the Massif Central, for they are equally lovely and join at Pont de la Madeleine. The next stretch is less attractive because of its proximity to the zinc mines of Dessart-Civil, and is best avoided by following the N122 through the Figerac to Mort-la-Jolie and the number 663 to Port des Agresses, whence another 36 kilometers of serene riverside road leads gently to Ingriat-Guts. Here the Truyère flows into the Lot, and the pleasant little town has two fine bridges, but its chief claim to fame was its site at the lower end of the gorge, when the Lot between Rotrajus and Estaing thrusts its way through a cleft in the mountains with a splendid turbulence of cascades. But it does so no longer, and when I went back there with Denys, I could have wept to see the wild river in the process of being tamed to the drab service of a hydroelectric power station. The reason why the girls of Estaing seldom have short hair is that this would disqualify them from figuring as angels, let alone being chosen to represent the Madonna at the fete on the first Sunday of July, when the highlight is the procession to the church, some dressed as the heavenly host and others as pilgrims to the shrine of Saint Jacques de Compostelle, or as members of the family of Estaing. The Estaings are included, not because of a lingering feudalism, but because the Bienheureux François d'Estaing, whose statue stares from the bridge at the castle where he was born, was a Renaissance saint who built the great tower of Rhodes Cathedral out of his revenues as its bishop. Rhodes is only 40 kilometers from Estaing, either by following the Lot to Espalion and then taking the N120 and the N88, or by the route I prefer, the D22 to Villy-Comtal and then south on the N604. The cathedral was begun on the 25th of May 1277 on the site of an older church, and continued to grow for the next 3 centuries. It is magnificent, but not magical, although it might have been so had the music been pouring from its unique organ, whose case of incredibly buoyant carving soars like a cantata in silver and wood. When Charles and I went to Rhodes, it was not primarily to see the cathedral, but because after 3 days of exploring by-roads in the Montagne de Aubrac, and finally attempting one which dwindled into a logging track so narrow and precipitous that it took 4 hours to negotiate, we wanted the unaccustomed luxury of a room with a bath. This was easy enough to find, for it was late in the season, but the water was tepid, and when we came downstairs, clean but uncomforted, we were told that dinner would be served punctually at 7:30, which was in 5 minutes. A glance into the empty dining room, where pallid as monstrous mushrooms the cloths of unlaid tables gleamed in the gloom, gave us the incentive to escape. Where should we eat? We would walk until we found somewhere. So we walked and walked, and seeing first a restaurant that was closed for the day, then another which was so full of lucky people sitting on comfortable chairs and eating and drinking that there was no vacant places for us to do so, these desirable things, unless we waited for at least an hour. Something must be done to amend our situation immediately, for Charles was so tired and thirsty, and so potentially fretful. I tried to visualize the relevant page of the Guide de Michelin, which I had left in the hotel. Had there been a restaurant marked with a star in Rodez? The shadowy image became a little clearer. Yes, there was such a restaurant, somewhere near the station. Perhaps it was called Le Hotel de la Gare. Charles was not enthusiastic, for to reach the station, which is on the northern fringe of the town, we would have to plod back nearly a mile to fetch the car. He was even less enthusiastic when I tried to take a shortcut, which led us far into uninhabited country before the road at last became wide enough for the car to turn around. It was after 9 when we reached the station. Charles looked searchingly in every direction and then exploded. No hotel, no restaurant, not even a bar. Search this bloody God's yard if you must, but don't expect me to come with you. The place may have been called the Buffet de la Gare, I said, despairingly, but he didn't answer. The place may have called the Buffet de la Gare, I said despairingly. Again, leaving him, glaring at nothing through the windscreen, I hurried away, praying at last I might find a bottle to placate him. We could drink out of tooth glasses and have a picnic in our room. It was almost sure there was an unopened tin of pâté and half a loaf of the remains of the camembert lurking among the luggage in the back of the car. The station was dark except for a light in the booking office. Then I noticed a reddish glow on the far side of the yard, light shining through red curtains. It might be a buffet and still open. We might at least get a drink even if we were too late for any food. My heart quickened as I drew closer. Geraniums in window boxes, improbable. I pushed open the door and stood incredulous for a moment before shouting for Charles. He too blinked as though he could not trust his eyesight when he stood with me on the threshold. Champagne coolers sparkled between gilt basket of fruit on a huge sideboard. The enormous looking glass over his black chimney piece reflected a scene that was as cosily Edwardian as a bustle or a straw boater. Thankfully we sank into chairs at the nearest table. There were perhaps 12 tables with cloths as smooth as the apron of an old-fashioned nanny. At 5 of them people were eating, and not with the drab purposefulness of travellers who cram food into themselves as though the stomach were no more a carrier bag, but savouring each mouthful with dedicated relish, as Shakespeare might have savoured the sweet syllables of a sonnet. Madame Frau, the priestess of this sanctuary, advanced smilingly upon us. She welcomed us as old friends, which we became in 2 minutes. What would we like to eat? We said it was for her to choose, for this seemed more courteous than to ask directly what was available in the kitchen. She gave us a menu on which were the names of at least 40 noble dishes, and left us to brood over it while our bodies caught up with the rise in our spirits by being given large brandies and sodas. She says, said Charles in an awed voice, that we can have anything on the menu. It's impossible that I'm inclined to believe it. He started with a dozen snails and I with a twit meunier, and both were gastronomic perfection. Then we had cervelles au beurre noir, 2 sets of brains each, the convulsions unbroken, the black butter exact, the capers neither too sparse nor over-dominant. Then Charles had veal in an admirable sauce, which I had the best rognon à la brochette I have ever tasted. Each morsel of kidney scented with herbs before being interleaved on the skewer with bacon. We were full by now, but still gloriously greedy. We had seen 6 superb souffles carried to other tables, each rising from its silver dish with a gay insouciance that the ones I attempt never achieve. Could any chef make 7 such souffles in a row? This one could, and did. It was large enough for at least 6 people, but we managed nearly all of it after I had unabashedly undone the waistband of my skirt. We stayed there, too happy and replete to move until after midnight. We thought the bill, when it came, would be enormous, but what did we care? Whatever the cost, we could not have had a better meal anywhere in France, said Charles, which is to say, in the world. And the service was worthy of the food, I agreed ecstatically. We should have been almost overburdened with bliss had we then known that the total bill, including the brandies and soda already mentioned, 2 carafes of superior wine, 1 white and 1 red, 3 lots of coffee and a pair of armagnacs, would be less than £3. Benignly, we watched diners come and go, none of them in a hurry, each placidly appreciative that eating can be an art. When the other guests did not require her attention, Madame Frau sat with us at our table. She showed me her kitchen, a room not much wider than a passage, in which her husband and son-in-law produced faultless dishes that could not have been bettered with 10 times their equipment, and a brigade de cuisine of 20 chefs. I told her with complete sincerity that I had never eaten better, not even before the war at La Perouse. We were talking of souffles when I remembered that they are supposed to go flat if anyone so much as bangs an oven door. It must be very annoying, I said, if a train stops at the station when your husband is making a souffle. She laughed. Many trains stop here, but they know about my buffet. I won the gold medal for the best in France. But I haven't had a train since we came in, and that is more than 3 hours ago, said Charles. She drew back the curtain from one of the windows, which flanked the sideboard, and stood smiling at our astonishment as we peered out. A train was drawn up at the platform. Within 6 yards of us, a proud passenger train of the kind whose arrival and departure demand pandemonium, yet all was silent. It was like seeing a ghost train. Porters were setting down suitcases as though they were paper bags of plovers' eggs. Crates were moved stealthily, as though by burglars in bedroom slippers. Carriage doors were closed without a sound, as though behind them a baby slept, which would have to be rocked to sleep again by anyone clumsy enough to waken it. I felt as though I was dreaming or watching a film whose soundtrack was out of action. The guard raised his trumpet, about to give an ear-splitting toot to signal the train's departure. Then he remembered he was outside the Buffet de la Gare at Rodez. His arm fell to his side. If the light had been brighter, I might have seen him blush. It was not Madame Fou who had reminded him of his obligation to gastronomy, but his own train. The engine, which had been holding its breath for 10 minutes, let out a sibilant whisper of steam. Hush, it insisted. Hush, 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 hush. And the long line of obedient carriages, like good children on tiptoe, crept out of the station on the velvet wheels. Now, that was the end, and I think here we have a picture of the Riverlot. I don't know if you can see it, but how interesting. I hope you have a lovely Thursday, the 28th of November.